Welcome back, everyone, to Frenemies. Today, I'm talking about productivity. So, right now, we're in November, which means most likely you are in a very busy period because you need to finish this year. There are a lot of things happening right now to end this year on a successful note and hopefully achieving your targets. While at the same time, you're most likely also already preparing the next year. So, of course, it's incredibly important to have a high productivity. And when I'm referring in this episode to productivity, I mean your own personal productivity. And there are a lot of factors that go into productivity and keeping it at an even pace and obviously at a high productivity rate. But there are also a lot of factors you can't influence. As, for example, external factors on, the company setup, the company strategy, the team around you, the productivity across the team, and so on, which all might have an impact on your own personal productivity. But I'm talking about the factors that influence an individual's productivity and also giving a bit of advice on what you can do to ensure your own productivity is at a good pace and at a pace where you can, produce the things you want to produce, achieve your own goals, and, keep it going in a sustainable way, obviously. So let's first talk about the components that influence an individual's productivity in the workplace. So obviously this is work focused. The first thing is strategy. So the ability to plan. And the second one is focus. So the ability to pay attention. The third one is productive choosing. So the ability to prioritize and to make the right choices on what you're working on. And the fourth is consistency, the ability to work at a consistent pace. And again, in each of these components, there are things you can't influence. So I will mainly focus on the things you can influence personally for yourself, and also how you can get to a better place with the things you can't influence. So let's talk about each of these components. Strategy is the first component that influences your own productivity. And obviously, strategy is the component that builds the foundation for the other three factors I just outlined and tie into it. Because with a clear strategy, you can prioritize the tasks you're working on because you know what matters and what it needs to achieve goals. So everything ties into the strategy, and you can constantly check in, does this task tie into the strategy? Does it help what we want to achieve in the short term and in the long term? But the problem is that you can't most likely influence an overall strategy as an individual. So even if you are in marketing or sales leadership, the overall company strategy you influence to a certain part, but obviously that is a decision or a strategy that is built in an outline of all of the stakeholders. So the overall strategy you can only influence to a certain extent. And of course, if you're not in leadership, then again, you might have influence on specific parts of the strategy, but not the overall strategy. So of course, that is not something that is up to you personally. But if you are in charge of an area or of specific tasks, this is something you can set, and it is obviously something that the overall leadership, the leadership of your team should set as well. Of this is the strategy, this is the plan of where we're headed. So you are constantly sure on how that you can plan ahead, and you know what is coming overall this month, next month, this week, next week, and so on and so on. So you constantly know what you are working towards and what is coming up. And obviously there are always new things added into it. Things change, and it is completely normal. But if you have this foundation and this overall plan, it is easier to plan ahead and to know what's coming, which means you are actually mentally prepared. You know what is expected of you, how the things that are expected of you actually help the company to achieve their goals, and so on, which again influences the other three factors that go into your own productivity. The second factor that influences productivity is focus. So the ability to pay attention, which obviously is an incredibly important factor if you want to be productive, so that you can actually focus on the tasks that you're working on and the things you are in charge of and responsible for. How to improve focus is, and that ties a lot into also what Sally told us last episode on burnout and mental health and things like that. So one factor is, of course, your physical and your mental health, and things that, without diving deeper into physical and mental health, and I think a lot of these things you are most likely aware of that you can do, but work-related things is take regular breaks that help you, meaning regular breaks that do whatever it is that helps you best. So for example, for one person, it might be, I don't know, going on a walk on their own because they need a bit of space in an office environment for themselves. For other people, for example, for me, I'm an extrovert. So on like breaks, I like to engage with people because that is what gives me energy. So I like to, for example, lunch break, I prefer that to have that with colleagues and to engage with people, and that gets kind of my mind off and gives me a break that gives me energy and lets me focus again afterwards on my tasks. So it's important for yourself to know what is it that helps you and that you need, and to give yourself these breaks that serve exactly that. Second is work in a setup that enables you to focus. So again, this is an individual thing of what environment works best for you. Again, you might not be able to influence if your company has a work from home policy and things like that, but having the clarity of this is actually how I work best and how I can focus best is a really important part. So for example, if you are like in an office setup, but you need for some tasks or just in general more focus and you feel like you can't have that in an office environment, then look if you want to work from meeting rooms where you feel more like in your own space and you can focus better. Or if you want to ask if you can have work from home days, because that increases your productivity and you can actually focus better. So again, this is very much an individual thing. For me, for example, again, as I'm an extrovert, I like to be in the office space, but I am definitely way more focused when I'm working from home. And I'm way more sharp because I'm not distracted by whatever is going on around me, because I can get distracted from my tasks because I want to engage. So for me, for example, a hybrid model works very well because I have days where I am at the office and I can get energy from being around people and talking to people. But I also know that these work from home days really work well for me because those are days where I just am very focused, laser sharp, and get a lot of stuff done. Third is vacation time. Again, in addition to having breaks that help you in the everyday, vacation periods where your mind is completely off work are very important. So vacation time is a really big thing. And the biggest thing on kind of what helps you focus better is choosing to focus on the moment. So if your mind is constantly distracted by what has been going on in the past or what is coming in the future, you tend to be less able to focus because you're not actually focusing on what needs to happen right now. You're already worrying about what is happening next week, what is happening in the next meeting, and so on. So try to stay very focused on what you want to achieve right now, what needs to happen right now, instead of worrying about the future. And I know that is easier said than done, but how you want to do that personally is your own thing. So I can't give advice on kind of how to do that, because it is your own kind of individual thing to figure out what might be stopping you or worrying you. And again, it can tie into that there's an overall plan missing or an overall strategy missing, so you don't actually feel like secure. There can be lots of different factors, But if you notice that while you're working on things, your mind actually goes off to different topics related to the future or the past, then that is a really good point to kind of start digging in. What would help me to be able to focus on the now? Another thing is, of course, to eliminate distractions. So it can be very helpful to block time in your calendar. So for, that I need 2 hours for this task, or I need 2 hours to answer emails, or things like that. So block time in your calendar. So you, first of all, give yourself this time and you already plan this time ahead. But second of also to, of course, ensure that nobody distracts you in this time. And again, there can be different things or agreements you have in the team as well on writing Slack messages or whatever chat platform you use, or things like that. For example, with a previous manager of mine, because again, I have a tendency to, chat a little bit or wanting to engage with people, we had the thing of, we both had kind of figurines at our desk. So if she would put the figurine up, that would kind of be the sign of, I need to be super focused right now, so please don't talk to me. And the same for me when I put my figurine up. But when we both had them down, then it was like, okay, this is a free time and we're not like super focused right now, because I don't know, we're not writing content, or we're not making important reports. So this is a time where we can just free chat, and that helped us both a lot. So I wouldn't feel like, oh gosh, I'm distracting her, and it would help her because she would know, okay, the figurine is up, so I can have this focus time. So again, there's very different things you can do also in the team and with your colleagues to get to a better path there. But don't feel shy to talk about the things that help you to focus better and that eliminate distractions. Another thing that helps you to focus better is reduce multitasking. I am prone to multitasking, and I would, or I like to think that I'm good at it. But what actually happens when you multitask is that you think you have a high efficiency because you're fixing a lot of things at the same time and you're doing this and that, and you think, wow, I'm getting so much done. But our brains aren't actually made for multitasking. So it actually reduces productivity, because everything you do actually makes your brain busier than it should be. So differentiating these tasks and focusing on one thing at a time is way more productive and helps you focus more. And that way you also put less pressure on yourself on the things you want to achieve in a certain time frame. The second to last thing that helps you focus better is to set daily priorities on what you want to accomplish. I do this both in personal and work-related tasks, that I set myself things or tasks that need to be done, the good old to-do list, right? And an important part on like both keeping your productivity up, but also on focusing, is to keep this at a realistic pace, or at a realistic number. So of course, if you're writing down, today I want to achieve 10 things, but it is just not possible for you to achieve these 10 things, then you are, setting yourself up for failure. So really outline, what are your top priorities? What are the top tasks that need to happen that day? And if you then manage 2 or 3 things more that aren't on the list, then that is fantastic. But make very clear that these are the things that need to happen. And the beautiful thing with that is also that you hold yourself accountable. And that means you are proving to yourself over and over again that you can do it, which actually then impacts motivation and all of these things, ensuring that you keep your productivity at an even pace. And lastly, a thing that helps you to focus more is switching between tasks. Again, of course, like this is not something you can always influence, and also that depends on different jobs so much, right? But I am a marketing generalist, so I have the chance to switch between different tasks, between, I don't know, making a report, analyzing data, and being creative, writing copy, or strategizing. And that is actually something that helps the brain, because you switch what part of the brain you use and how you engage your brain with different tasks. So switching between tasks helps you to focus more, because kind of your brain doesn't get tired of it. So you get more focused. If in your work that is not something you can do, so for example, an SDR, of course, also has different tasks, but if an SDR still has to make that and that many calls in one day, he or she can't just say, oh, I'm going to do something else now. That is what the job entails, right? So then it becomes even more important to take regular breaks. So you still give your brain this off time to then get back to it with kind of new energy before your brain tires out and you lose focus. So those were the things that can help you to set yourself up for success and focus better on the things that you are working on, which obviously increases your productivity. The third component that influences productivity is the ability to prioritize your tasks. And in this section, I'm going to talk about a few schemes and models that you can use to prioritize your tasks. Again, at the end of the day, this all should tie into an overall strategy. So prioritization is, of course, something that you as a leader should be very clear on setting for your team, but also you as an employee. It should be very clear what the priorities for your tasks are and which ones are the most important. So if you have one-on-ones with your manager, that is, for example, something that should be checked out there constantly. So you are very aligned and you know what to focus on and which task has which priority. So what I, for example, would like to do with my team is, and also for myself, to have a variety of long-term and short-term projects and tasks. So there are long-term things where we know, the deadline is rather like much in the future, in the upcoming weeks or months, and tasks that have a shorter deadline. So you have this switch again between tasks of knowing, okay, this is a thing I'm working consistently on a few hours every day. And these are things I'm working on this day and that day. So to enable everyone to switch between tasks, but also to not just sit with the same thing constantly, and to also switch between different priorities. So the first kind of model that helps you prioritize is called the Eisenhower matrix. And what it works is basically it's a matrix where you have 4 different fields, which are important and urgent, important and not urgent, not important and urgent, and not important and not urgent. So basically you can take all of your tasks for a certain time period, so maybe 1 week, and put it into these things. How important is the task and how urgent is the task? And everything that is important and urgent is a do, like priority. This needs to be done. Everything that is important but not urgent is something that should be scheduled. So it might not be something for this week, it might be a task for next week. Anything that is not important and urgent, according to the Eisenhower matrix, should be delegated. Now, you might not be in the position where you can delegate these things, right? So you might need to put this into the schedule thing as well. That depends very much on your role, your setup, and the team setup. And anything that is not important and not urgent should, of course, get deleted or get a very low priority. So you can think about how these 4 fields fit into like your tasks and your priorities. That is also something you can use this metrics to check up with your manager. You can even ask to implement this across the team, so everybody always knows like what is the urgency and what is the importance. If you're, for example, using a project management tool, that is something you can add there, so you have fields for level of importance and level of urgency. And one thing, especially as a leader, that is very important to look at is not all tasks can be important and urgent. If all your tasks are important and urgent, then you most likely have a problem because you can't achieve all of these tasks all at once. So then that is something that needs to be discussed with management of how this should be handled, because some of these priorities need to change. And what I would also add there is that you have a mix of long-term and short-term tasks. So again, of tasks that have a very long-ranging deadline and tasks that have a shorter deadline. So you can actually switch between and achieve things that build goals for the future and build goals for the now and achieve things now. As I said before, one thing I criticize a bit with the Eisenhower metrics is that I don't know how applicable it is to every task and every team setup and you as an individual, because again, you might not be in a position where you can delegate tasks. And it also depends very much on the tasks you have on the table. But it is a very easily usable metrics. So you can also adjust it to fit your needs. So I would definitely leave the level of importance there, for example, and the level of urgency depends on how that fits into your tasks. You can also add other layers into it. So one thing, for example, when I create a strategy and discuss with leadership what of this strategy should be done, I look at the expected outcome. So what is the expected outcome of a project or a task? And the higher the expected outcome, the higher priority it should have. So there are different things you can kind of put into the Eisenhower metrics and use this kind of simple outline and make it fit to your personal tasks or needs. The second kind of principle you can use to prioritize tasks is the Pareto principle. So the idea is that 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. So if we translate that, it basically means 80% of your activities produce 20% of your results, and the other way around. So what I would use from that principle, because again, I question how applicable it is to all tasks and setups. What you can do with it, though, is to identify the tasks that generate the biggest results and figure out, okay, these are the ones that I should focus on because they have the highest expected outcome, the highest results. So those should definitely be the focus and take 80% of your time. An example is paid media or performance marketing, where you typically have a base layer. So the entire demand capture part you run on LinkedIn or Google Ads. That is exactly that, right? Normally, once it's up and running, it is a very nice baseline of this is just demand that gets captured. And that builds maybe not 80%, but, a very high share of very high outcome that comes in. And the work you have to do is incredibly little. So you only have to optimize the campaigns you have set up there, maybe do a few A/B tests, but you're not at the level anymore where you have to invest 80% of your time on that. So it's exactly this idea of, okay, what is the foundation that comes where you should spend very little time, and what are the other things where you are building to get to this foundation that brings a lot of outcomes. The third technique is the Pomodoro technique. And how this works is the idea is to break a bigger task into smaller chunks and work on each chunk for 25 minutes. And then take a 5-minute break in between. So what the idea of the principle basically is that instead of overwhelming yourself and kind of building up this, fear to act because you have this massive thing coming up, break it down for yourself so you don't set the expectation for yourself that this massive task, I'm going to do it in one sitting. So one example for me is I wrote for a presenter, there was also an episode here, an e-guide. And this guide is, I think it ended up being 60 pages and was based on a research. So you can imagine that was a lot of work. So, it's a task that I kind of had been dragging because I had this I need to produce this e-guide. I need to write this piece of content, this very long piece of content. So would I have at that point used that principle? I would have broken it down, right? And I would have said, okay, on this day, I'm writing one chapter. And even on this one chapter, I would have said, I write one page, then I take a 5-minute break. I write another page, then I take a 5-minute break. Instead of hovering over me, okay, I need to write an entire chapter or an entire guide in one sitting, which can really much be tough on your motivation. So I think that is a principle that you can very nicely and easily use. Of course, you can adjust the time frames that fit your needs. It doesn't have to be 25 minutes and 5 minutes, but of course, it's a very nice, overseeable time frame. To say it's half an hour, you can easily break this down into your work day. But there's another technique actually that I didn't bring into this, and I forgot what it's called, so sorry for that. But the idea is, if you also give yourself a specific time frame for what you want to achieve in this time frame, you actually are more willing and likely to achieve these things. So again, this needs to be a realistic time frame, but there were studies made that if you, I don't know, now I'm just naming a silly example, but if you set yourself for, I want to write 100 emails, and you give yourself the time frame of 2 hours, you're more likely to achieve it in these 2 hours. And if you give yourself the expectation, or set yourself the goal, I want to write 100 emails in 4 hours, then you will still achieve it in the same time frame. Now, again, that depends on a lot of individual factors, but I think, that is something that can help you also to plan future tasks better, because then you can kind of, if you have a specific time frame, you can build up I wasn't realistic on this is achievable in 25 minutes. So the next time you plan this for 30 minutes. And there are two more principles I would like to introduce. One is called Eat the Frog. It goes back to a saying from Mark Twain, so that's why it has kind of this funny title. And the idea there is that you take on the most significant task first thing in the morning. So basically, you are starting with the hardest thing, or the thing you might be dreading the most, because it is high priority and it is very significant, might take a longer time. So you take that one on, and then you move on to other tasks. So you already have a big achievement at the start of the day. Plus, most likely at the start of the day, you are most focused. So this gives you this big motivational push of, I have already achieved it, versus doing it the other way around, which I think would most often be the more natural way to do it, of first doing lighter things and trying to achieve some things, and you're kind of pushing this throughout the entire day and pushing this big significant task throughout the entire day. And then you might start it too late, or you might not even start it, because then it's afternoon and you notice, oh, okay, I can't achieve it now, and I only have 1 hour left, and this task takes 3 hours, so I can't achieve it now, so I do it tomorrow, which gives yourself kind of this demotivation and a bad feeling, because it is this, I didn't achieve it. I set myself a goal and I didn't finish my goal. So a lot of these things relate very much to proving to yourself that you can do it and holding yourself accountable, which is then setting yourself up for success. And the last principle I want to introduce here is called GTD by David Allen. It stands for Getting Things Done, which obviously is a great title. And the idea of it is basically that you first capture your tasks. I think most people do that. It can be like on a written note. It can be in a project management tool. It might be in several places, whatever works best for you. For me, for example, I need to write these things down. So even though we have a project management tool, I way much prefer to have a list myself and write these down, because it also means I actually remember them. Then you clarify your tasks, so you break them down into actionable steps. So again, instead of having this monster task, you put it into smaller steps that are achievable and seem achievable and are realistic. Then you organize your tasks. So you put them into different categories. And these categories, of course, depend very much on what your work entails and the different tasks you have on the table, of what helps you best to categorize them. That can be, of course, categorized on a timely manner of today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, or it can also be by urgency, importance, priority, all of these things. Might also be other categories. So for me, for example, it could be like, this is sales related, this is performance marketing related, this is content related. That depends very much. So, adjust this and make this fit for you. After organizing comes reflecting. So check your progress and your goals. So reflect on, are my goals realistic? Am I progressing in the way I should? And then, of course, engage. So take action and complete them and get them done. So all of these are ways that can help you to prioritize your tasks. And again, there are different principles of these that work for you as a person, for your specific role. So these are just examples. All of these you can very much fit into what helps you. And again, if you in general struggle with prioritizing your tasks, or you feel like there is a mismatch or a misalignment between your tasks and the team strategy, the overall strategy and plan, then discuss this with your manager, with leadership, and so on and so on. And the last component I earlier introduced that influences your productivity is consistency. So the ability to work at a consistent pace, which is something that is actually really important for us as people, for us as humans, for our brains, because that is what actually ensures productivity, to stay consistent instead of having these peaks and then the lows and peaks and lows, and especially to not get into a downward spiral at a very, very high pace. It is way healthier and therefore also way more productive to keep this at an even pace. And for me, this component is basically the outcome of the three previous components. So the outcome of having a clear plan and staying very focused and prioritizing your tasks effectively is that you are consistent. And the things that influences how consistent you are in your productivity are, for example, motivation and recognition. So staying motivated, right? Because when productivity lowers, there are different things that happen, but one of them is, of course, that you get demotivated, either because you lose your focus, because you feel like you're not achieving things, you're not getting your things done, which is very demotivating. And that's where I also bring recognition in, because, of course, you get motivated by feeling recognized for what you're doing. And recognition doesn't have to come kind of from external parties or external factors. Recognition can also come from yourself, right? Of, I recognize what I have achieved there. So both of these factors are, of course, very much impacted by the team you are in and the setup you are in, but you can also influence these yourself by recognizing yourself for the work you're doing, by keeping yourself motivated and proving to yourself that you can achieve these things in the time frame you set yourself, and so on and so on. Another factor is, of course, to avoid procrastination. We all procrastinate in our own ways, and that's also what a lot of these techniques that help you prioritize do, is to avoid that you are procrastinating. Because again, if you procrastinate, you get demotivated, because you're not doing what needs to be done, and you're kind of holding yourself actually back. Massive factor there is to hold yourself accountable. Set yourself realistic goals on what you want to achieve every day, every week, and so on, and hold yourself accountable for it. And that way, actually, your tendency to procrastinate is gonna get less and less, because you're constantly proving to yourself that you can do things, and that actually it has a massive positive impact on you to achieve things. And the third point is to, of course, achieve goals and celebrate them. So achieving things, that's a great thing, and celebrate that you achieve these things. And again, that can be done very differently in different teams. So again, this can be a thing you do yourself, where you say yourself, bam, I did it. But also, of course, big goals or achieving goals, especially B2B sales and marketing, it's always a team effort. So celebrating these together and achieving these things together is an incredible push of motivation, and again keeps the consistency up, because you see what you have actually done, and especially in a team, you celebrate it together. So it gives everyone a big push on, hey, this is why we're working together. We are working towards the same goal. So this is also where it relates to sales and marketing alignment, right? When you celebrate these things together, you acknowledge each other for the work you are all doing. And to keep consistency up, it is of course also important to make continuous adjustments that help you to stay motivated and work at a consistent pace. So if things influence, like you might have figured out a way that works for you and now it doesn't anymore, then make adjustments that help that. We all constantly change. There are lots of factors we can't influence that change the way we produce. So make adjustments that fit to, again, the now, the time you're in, and what helps you be productive at this point. And a big part of the consistency is also 80% of people, and that relates to personality types, 80% of people hate change. Like most humans aren't happy or excited about change. They actually hate change because, there's a lot of things impacted when things change. Yet our world obviously constantly changes, and there's lots of factors in companies that change. So that is something to just be aware of and try to see where you can bring continuity and this long-term planning into it, knowing that things will always change, always get impacted. Alone the priorities of tasks can change constantly, right? So that is just something to be aware of. And these were all my hacks to get more productive. As a German, I'm quite a bit of an efficiency machine, so that is also why it's a big passion topic of mine, and obviously relating to a lot of things I talk about on the podcast, as for example, sales and marketing alignment, but also related to the episode last week of burnout. So I hope you found this helpful and that you listen again next week. Bye.